Welcome to Nita's Excerpts from the Experts, 7-minute learning sessions with researchers and practitioners in the field of eating disorders, and individuals who share their experiences and perspectives. I'm your host, Sarah Bowie-Keaton. This week, our guest is Maggie Klyce. She is a therapist, certified eating disorder specialist, and supervisor working in private practice in Birmingham, Alabama. She is a national presenter on the topic of eating disorders, autism, and addiction, and she currently serves on the Eating Disorder Treatment Facilitator Task Force, aimed to provide support for primary care physicians in the detection and treatment of eating disorders. Today, Maggie Klyce will be speaking about autism and eating disorders. Maggie, welcome to our program. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Can you talk about why eating disorders are prevalent among autistic individuals?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different reasons. Some are going to be related to potential genetic links, along with similarities in the ways that the brain functions. So in ARFID, we know there's a specific neurodevelopmental gene that's been identified to be associated with it. So that's the Z-SWIM6 gene. And then we know that for autism and anorexia, that they more frequently co-occur in families, so suggesting that there is a genetic link there. When we're talking about the way that the brain functions, there are overlaps too. So, for example, both autistic individuals and those with anorexia are more likely to have difficulties with things like shifting from one task to another or one way of doing things to another, to have challenges when it comes to flexibility, kind of preferring things to be the same, and then are more likely to have sensory sensitivities. So we have these biological overlaps, and then we also have these neurocognitive traits that really increase the likelihood for the development of an eating disorder. Beyond that, when we're talking about anorexia and we're conceptualizing it as really as the eating disorder being a way to get different needs met, it tends to meet some of the needs that autistic individuals have. So for example, some clients with an eating disorder will talk about the first time that they restricted was they skipped lunch. And maybe that was because the lights were too bright, the peers were talking too loudly, whatever that might be. But then they found out for the rest of the day, some of those sensory sensitivities weren't as pronounced. And so it was, hey, if I use this eating disorder behavior, I'm not as bothered by the sensory input. Other things that you'll frequently hear might be like struggles with regulating emotion, and that the eating disorder behaviors helped in that emotion regulation piece. Or for individuals who are really wanting to develop friendships, connect more, that unfortunately for our very diet obsessed culture, talking about diet, food, exercise, body image are ways to connect with others. So, I mean, really, that's what we're looking at when we're talking about these different overlaps. Of there are some genetic overlaps, there's biological, and then we have just the needs that the eating disorder can meet.
How does eating disorder treatment need to be tailored to the needs of autistic individuals?
So I think above all, it's important that you really find a provider who is knowledgeable about both eating disorders and autism. Because when we're looking at tailoring treatment, a big piece of it is that we can't separate the two out. We can't treat the eating disorder in a vacuum because of how linked the eating disorder and autism are. So we're really working throughout treatment to discern what behaviors are related to the eating disorder and what behaviors are related to autism. And this isn't a one-time discussion, but a discussion that needs to happen throughout treatment. And it guides interventions, because if it's related to the eating disorder, we need to challenge it. We need to treat it. But we're not trying to challenge or treat or change the autism. So if it's related to the autism, it's looking more at, okay, well, how can we make this work within the context of eating disorder recovery? Another shift can be, it's really helpful to have an occupational therapist on the treatment team. So that an occupational therapist can help support some of the navigation of sensory related concerns, and also support being able to execute tasks that might be difficult and impact eating disorder recovery. So, for instance, some individuals, might restrict because it's really difficult to identify how to come up with a grocery list, or to follow a recipe to cook a meal, or to go to the grocery store. And so having an OT to kind of support being able to execute those tasks in practice can be helpful. So having that hands-on experience too is really important. Another area that's going to look a little bit different is when it comes to change, because change is often very challenging for autistic individuals. And so my mantra tends to be trying to make as much of the unknown known. So some of the ways we might do this are going to be bringing in as much predictability as possible, whether that's with appointment times, appointment locations, discussing changes well in advance, providing very specific information on the treatment that's being provided and the roadmap of what that's going to look like. Also, not going to introduce as much variety into food from the get-go, and really ease into changes of that more slowly. Having those predictable times of when an individual is going to be eating. So just a lot, trying to just bring in a lot more predictability to help ease some of the concerns around change are just a few ways that we might try to alter treatment a little bit.
What are some key takeaways that you can offer to autistic individuals and their families who are struggling with eating disorders?
Yeah, so some of my biggest takeaways are really to work to honestly assess what things are related to the eating disorder, what are related to autism, and what ones you're not sure of, because this really provides the roadmap for where acceptance needs to come in and where we need to focus on change. I also think being able to connect to your strengths is huge because there are so many different amazing traits that autistic individuals are more likely to have that can be a real asset when it comes to recovery. And so being able to identify those and honor those and talk about how those can support you in the recovery process. The other thing that I want to highlight is that it's just the hope that recovery is possible, and really to encourage dropping comparisons to others because everyone's timeline is different. And we know that for autistic individuals, it can take a little bit longer to see some of that cognitive change. So for some of those eating disorder thoughts to start to go away. And so it might require a little bit longer in treatment. It might require more frequent maintenance sessions, but just to hold the hope that it's possible.
Holding hope. I like that. Ending on a good note. And thank you so much for your time. This was really informative. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
NEDA's mission is to support individuals and families affected by eating disorders and serve as a catalyst for prevention, cures, and access to quality care. NEDA offers programs and services designed to help you find the help and support you need. Whether you have been personally affected by an eating disorder or care about someone who has, recovery is possible, and we're here to support you.